Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to today's session on dealing with mental health challenges. As you all know, World Mental Health Day has recently passed and a lot of organizations actively advocated the importance of practicing better self-care and seeking professional help. Today, we will explore the world of counseling and therapy, and our certified counselor Batool Curmally will reveal their motivations behind completing their diploma on humanistic counseling and the mental health landscape. You will discover the key to selecting the right therapist and navigating cultural concerns. We'll also provide a comprehensive list of resources for seeking better help during challenging times. And I believe that this is the need of the hour. And that is why, for this very reason, today we have a very special guest on board, Batool Karmali. So she is the head of English copy and associative creative director at Spectrum. But at the same time, she's also a trainee therapist with a diploma in humanistic integrative counseling from CPPD, Pakistan. And she's going to talk to you about mental health and how to effectively uh, deal with mental health challenges. So, welcome on board, Batul.
Hi, Aisha. Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
So, what motivated you to become a certified counselor? I mean, that is quite an interesting shift, I would say, that you have taken in your career.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, so it kind of went like this. I've actually found therapy has been very helpful in my own life at various stages in terms of getting support, in terms of feeling heard and understood. And I feel in our society, we kind of like tend to build a lot on like judgment and shame, right? So it's not okay in a lot of ways to just be. And I found therapy to become that safe space where I could just talk about anything without feeling judged. And over time, I kind of realized that okay, it's been really wonderful and healing how therapy was there for me to be that safe space. And now I would like to be in a position where I can hold space for others, right? It's kind of like passing the gift on, and shining that torch for others. So that's how it kind of got started. It definitely was something I wanted to do. I felt like it was another career I wanted to pursue. I've always had a love for psychology, and I think I even studied it. And then over time, I found I circled back to it again and again. So this has kind of been really, really insightful. It's been insightful. It's really been a journey of self awareness. It's been incredibly healing, and it's been extremely humbling in learning to hold others in this journey.
That's amazing. So, for our audience, can you share the different approaches when it comes to therapy and the difference between seeking counseling and therapy and psychiatry? Because I think a lot of us tend to like mix it all up, and when we're going through mental health challenges, we just don't know what to do, and all we know is to go to some hospital and find a psychiatrist and ask for medication. So can you just walk our audience through the differences between counseling and therapy and psychiatry?
Sure. So counseling is basically focused more on talk therapy, and I'm a humanistic integrative counselor. So we work with three different schools of counseling, which are the person-centered, where we kind of see people as a whole. We use transactional analysis, which sort of leans more towards looking at childhood, and then we look at gestalt, which talks about the here and now and what is our unfinished business. This
Mhm.
helps us sort of get a more holistic view of our client and really work with empathy and holding them sort of in unconditional positive regard, right? It brings us to a position of being really congruent with ourselves and with our clients. So, talk therapy only focuses on the talking element. There may be specializations within talk therapy. For
Mhm.
example, there may be people may be trauma specialists, or they may be grief and bereavement specialists.
Mhm.
My own tutor Samya Chandragar is an eating disorder specialist. So there are different facets within talk therapy where you can get help more specific to your needs. Psychologists are clinically trained to work with different mental health disorders, and there may be psychologists who offer talk therapy, so they're known as psychotherapists. And thereafter, there are psychiatrists, and psychiatrists are the ones who are able to administer medication.
Mm.
And psychotherapists or psychologists are trained to work with clients. They have that clinical background, which enables them to work with clients who are on medication, something that we as therapists are not equipped to do. However, we do need to make the judgment call about whether a client does need an assessment, and then discuss it with the client and work forward with their consent very much at every step. Another part of the work which I've really come to appreciate, and especially CPPD does offer, that is a lot of transparency and ethics in the process. This has been really, really heartening for me. For example, our work is supervised at every single step, not just at the beginning, but at every stage of the work. And that does really create a lot of safety in the work for us and for our clients. And not just that, all of our work is contracted. For example, we do talk to our clients about like confidentiality, sort of being at the forefront of all we do. Sort of what are the boundaries, the time boundaries, the ethics around it. And so we do that as a first step with our clients, that we inform them that the work is supervised. So everything is sort of in their knowledge, everything is transparent and above board.
So, how do we know that, okay, we need to go and see a psychologist, or we need to go and see a psychotherapist or a counselor, as you just explained? Like, how does one differentiate when one needs to refer to whom?
So, a lot of times, um, it depends on the severity of the symptoms, I would say, of what's showing up and how immediately you need help. If you're someone who's having panic attacks and
Hmm.
anxiety, then yes, most likely. And if you're having like somatic manifestations of anxiety, it would probably be helpful to go to a psychiatrist as a first step and see if you need any medication. However, if you just kind of need help managing issues like anxiety that's not debilitating, that's not affecting your quality of life to that degree, then perhaps it is better to start with a counselor and say, okay, well, this is my presenting issue,
Hmm.
what I'm dealing with. And I would really like some help. You can set goals for therapy. We can work according to sort of a certain number of sessions, or we can work on a more prolonged plan based on kind of what the client wants to work through and also what the client is dealing with. A lot of times, we all have a lot of trauma.
Hmm.
Each and every one of us are dealing with some kind of trauma, some kind of struggles that originate in our childhood. And they manifest in different ways, right? It can come up as hypervigilance, it can come up as anxiety. And it just depends on how we want to work on healing ourselves. I do believe that therapy is a wonderful place to start because it's a great way of building your self awareness and kind of seeing things from a different lens,
Hmm.
getting a perspective on things. And a lot of challenging of these barriers we set up for ourselves with the I shoulds and I can'ts and I musts. And also like sort of challenging these scripts that we put up for ourselves, like these sort of beliefs that, oh, if I don't do something like do everything this person wants, they won't love me and they won't want me. And one of the realizations that's come up is when we over the course of the work, over the course of the diploma, over perhaps my personal therapy also, is that when we feel that in our immediate environments we are not wanted, then we go out of our way to feel needed. We find different ways to feel needed in our everyday, in our every interaction, whether it means sort of like going above and beyond to excel, right? Like these are all these different masks we wear, whether it's the mask of the perfectionist or the mask of the controller or the mask of sort of the victim. We just want to be needed in some way,
Yeah.
and want to sort of be seen and witnessed and
Yeah.
heard, actually, most importantly.
So, I have seen that a lot of people, especially in Pakistan, they have lost, losing faith in the importance of therapy, counseling. They think it's a waste of money. They're just like going there just to, talk to a stranger about their problems, and there's like no benefit or no change attached to therapy. So, what are your thoughts on this? And can you share some examples which show कि नहीं, therapy can actually be a transformational healing experience, uh, even with how things are within our current ecosystem in Pakistan.
Yeah, sure. Actually, so life is a journey, and thus healing is a journey. The great thing is that there are therapists at various price points that can work for everyone.
Hmm.
If for a lower price point on terms of therapy, it's totally okay to work with a trainee, as we charge a very nominal amount for in-person and online sessions. However, you know what? Not every therapist is for everyone. You can go to Pakistan's best doctor and still have a horrible experience, right? It's just about what works for you. And sometimes you'll find support and care with the most unexpected doctor. I do have to take a moment to appreciate um, basically the amount of vulnerability it takes for someone to go to therapy and open up to a stranger. It's a scary thing to do. It's a difficult thing to do, to sort of lay yourself bare like that, and to open up about what is deeply personal, deeply intimate, and sometimes really filled with a lot of shame for many of us. There's always a fear of being judged, there's always a fear of being rejected, so it's difficult. And yes, it does take a certain number of sessions to see, okay, whether the relationship is working or not. In an ideal relationship with your therapist, it would be helpful to identify if you feel something is not working for you, and,
Hmm.
and be able to bring that forward to the therapist and say, hey, this is not working. What can we do together to make it work? And sometimes you find it just doesn't work for you, and you do change. People do change their therapists, and that's totally okay as well. It is a little difficult because that means opening yourself up again to someone, building the therapeutic alliance with someone, building that trust and that connection. It can be a little difficult, but you do what it takes to get the support you need, right? Ultimately, at the end of the day. Um, and so sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But also, I would like to point out that therapy works when both the client and the therapist work together, but the client also is willing to
Mm.
push past and work through some of these very, very difficult, challenging, and emotionally heavy things, because a lot of it means confronting your own behavior. A lot of it
True.
means sort of standing up and taking ownership of one's
Yeah.
own behavior and being like, okay, yeah, maybe this is something I can do a little differently. And there are things that traumatizes and re-traumatizes, right? So for example, if you've been bullied as a child, then in the workplace, that there can be a political workplace, for example, then that bullying in the workplace might also re-traumatize you.
Yeah.
And it's important to
Triggered.
in that moment be able to recognize, okay, I'm not that small defenseless child anymore.
Mm.
I can stand up for myself, I can defend myself, and in this moment I am safe. I can take a stand. It's also learning to recognize where you do need to and don't need to engage, what's in your control, what's not in your control, and when it's okay to walk away,
Yeah.
right?
Every
Because
battle is worth fighting for.
yeah, it's also, yeah, absolutely. And the thing is that we will keep responding when we're triggered. It's only when we start choosing ourselves and choosing self-love that we say, okay, I really do, I need to engage.
Yeah.
Do I need to give this a time of day? Okay, and maybe I can just walk away from it. And what would happen if I did? But it
Yeah.
takes a lot of self reflection, introspection, being attuned with ourselves to say, okay, yeah, I'm going to choose what's best for me. I'm going to drop what is no longer serving me. And it's not easy. These are habits we've built over a lifetime. It's difficult to say, okay, I'm going to put it down, I'm going to walk away.
Mm.
It's challenging to do that. So I do appreciate the vulnerability and the bravery and the courage it takes for people to come into therapy and talk about stuff.
So,
Definitely.
Batul, I think that brings me to my next question, that
Sure.
how does one go about selecting the right therapist? And by the way, right means different for different people.
Yeah.
But I think generally, as a rule of thumb, people look for qualifications, people look for some sort of progress and some sort of impact in the therapy. And I must also like add to this that we are very impulsive, I think, as a nation as well, and we want quick fixes. So we are like, okay, after two sessions, oh my god, why am I not changing, or why am I not feeling better?
Yeah.
So keeping everything together, like, what does a right therapist look like for oneself, and how do I gauge that?
So one of the things that is important to know is where to look, right? I do recall some years ago, Taskeen had introduced a really comprehensive sort of directory almost of where you can find therapists according to your city, which I thought was tremendous because a lot of times we don't know where to look. And I thought that was a wonderful initiative. Another way that a lot of clients do come through is that they'll contact CPPD directly and they'll say, I'm looking for a therapist and roughly in this price range, and they'll be assigned. In terms of qualifications, what you mentioned, I agree. Qualifications do play a role, but it's also about the lived experience, right? It's
Mm.
about how much your therapist is able to empathize with you through their own lived experience, right? And CPPD is very experiential, which I feel really contributes to that empathy building and the holding in the therapist themselves. In terms of finding the therapist that's right, we have a short form that we require clients to fill, which kind of identifies what they're looking for, what they're comfortable with. Are there any specific pronouns they would like to be addressed by? What is their presenting issue? And then based on that, we work with the client accordingly. There's definitely no quick fix. It's just like life is not a quick fix, and changing behavior is not a quick fix. And but what is a quick fix is knowing that there is a safe space that you can be held and take even the most shame-based thing with complete safety, complete confidence too. So CPPD is a good resource to ask for therapists and to see what kind of works. Another thing that people do all the time is that they do ask online in all these women's groups that I've seen. So somehow things tend to align in a way that you end up with the therapist that you are meant to be with, who is meant to be with you in your journey for a certain amount of time. And it's just sort of it's really strange where it just comes together really beautifully.
So, what do you think are the typical cultural concerns when it comes to seeking help? A lot of people shy away from seeking help, and people think that okay, maybe it will all go away. A lot of times mental health issues are taken very lightly and they're brushed aside by even close
Right.
ones and even family members, right? So what do you think are the typical cultural reasons that why mental health is not taken seriously, and how do you think that we can effectively deal with them?
There's a lot of shame in our society at
Hmm.
feeling like there's something wrong with us, and it's even if we're feeling it, that acknowledgement of feeling like something is not okay. I think it comes from a lot of fear. It comes from a lot of fear. I think one of the biggest is, of course, the societal "ho, log kya kahenge," or they'll tell you to try different things, whether it's the spiritual approach, whether it is the get exercise, or aisa kuch nahi hai, you just have to change the way you think. People are very dismissive,
Yeah, very oversimplistic statements, or
and they're very
keep
dismissive
you have
of
to just,
someone's pain, right?
get busy or something.
The person who's suffering through it kind of understands कि उसके ऊपर क्या गुजर रही है. And sometimes they don't know how to explain it, they don't know what's happening. And yes, so there's a lot of stigma, but I have found it's extremely heartening that as sort of generations are progressing, today's youth is very, very open to
Hmm.
talking about what's going on. I think up to the people in my age now, we are more open about talking about it, but us time pe there was never anyone who really understood, or it was very few people that you could really talk to about this sort of thing. Like one of the things I brought up with someone in my family was to say, hey, you went through so much, how did you never need therapy? And I was told, well, there was no such option. I do feel like earlier there was just no availability, and as time is progressing, people are more okay to talk about it, to seek more support from the people around them. I do feel that is limited to a certain socioeconomic background.
Mhm.
Definitely, the privilege is there, and you can see it. The openness and the ability to say, "Hey, I'm not okay." It does sort of limit itself to a certain area. A lot of people who come from a lower socioeconomic background just don't have access to the means, or people who have the awareness or understand maybe, or have the resources to help. Um, I feel like definitely socioeconomic background is a bit of a challenge. But I think PAMH, Pakistan Association for Mental Health, is doing a great job. They have a free clinic at Depot Lines, and they do a lot of really great work. Um, and yeah, I mean, there are a couple of NGOs I think that do a lot of work, do help people from underprivileged backgrounds.
I'm just like also trying to understand, and I think a lot of people from the audience would also like to know, okay, how do you gauge that a loved one around you needs help? Because a lot of times, as you mentioned, कि लोग अपने आप को express नहीं कर पा रहे होते, उनके पास
Hmm.
vocabulary नहीं होती to actually talk about what's going on with them. You do
Hmm.
notice that the behavior is a bit off, but even then you don't know whether it's a phase, it's normal,
Hmm.
do they need help. So can you
Hmm.
just share some typical symptoms or some changes in behavior that you think should actually be addressed by going to therapy?
So I think that's such a valid point that you've raised, and thank you for bringing that up. Because that is something that we do struggle with when we live with someone. We may not pick up initially on something that's going on for them, but I think what's important is maybe building healthier communication and checking in with the other. Okay, hey, are you okay?
Hmm.
Another thing is definitely sort of there's a lot of unspoken things that are happening with the body language. A lot of like the anxiety with the playing with the hands, or like the restless foot, or some signs of anxiety or discomfort will exhibit, or like depression, for example. You'll see your loved one is sleeping more. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm giving you a very top of my head example, but manifestations of anxiety will be someone who's restless, who can't sit around, or who doesn't want to engage with anyone, who's very irritable, for
Hmm.
example. And if it persists over time, then it is something worth exploring and having a frank conversation about. And that can be hard too, because sometimes at home we don't have those relationships.
Yeah.
We can talk to each other in that way, right? Like you feel like, oh, you're going to cross some kind of invisible line. Um, but it is important to just check in and see if you find that there's some sort of a change happening. Just sort of observe it for a while and see what's going on, and then see also, like, sort of, I feel like consent is such an important part of this whole process, like to talk to the person who is going through the struggle. Ke bhai, what would you like to do? Would you like some help? A lot of times we will he- well-meaningly help people
Hmm.
the way we feel fit, right? Our need to save them comes out really strongly, but we do often forget to ask, what is it you need?
Yeah.
What would you like me to do? Because people need to be given the autonomy to ask for the help they need as well. And we tend to forget that completely. That for us, showing love is helping people, but maybe not in the way that they want to be helped. Without
Exactly.
asking how do they want to be helped.
That is very true, because we try to help in the way we would want others to help us,
Yeah.
but that might not be how others would also like to be helped. I mean, everybody, I think, has a different vocabulary when it comes to what sort of help they need and how they need that help. So
Mm.
I think that asking them, and sometimes you also don't get the answer right off the bat
Yeah.
as well, but obviously, you just have to keep on encouraging them, that and that there's like no shame. If they don't want to talk to you about it, they can probably like go and seek a therapist, and that's completely fine.
Also, that togetherness, though, Aisha, just to add on to what you're saying, also the togetherness, just being there with someone, and just sort of even a silent show of support is so meaningful. Just sitting with the person struggling, you say nothing. It's just like
Yeah.
being together.
Mm.
Even that is just a way of holding and just showing solidarity. Okay, I'm here and I feel what you're going through. I'm here with you. It's important to remember everything does pass. Just sometimes we need more help in helping getting through it.
True. True. Very true. So Batul, last but not the least, I think this conversation has been like super enlightening so far, and I hope that holds true for our audience as well and whoever is listening. So, you did mention that okay, the skin is one resource people can go
Yeah.
to where they can find like relevant list of like mental health professionals. uh, what other resources people can tap into to sort of also become better educated and also to find out the right therapists or psychologists for that matter.
So I have found, and I think a lot of people will agree, and people who are around me have also sort of agreed that it's that word of mouth that does so much for building the credibility of that recommendation, right? You will go to someone who someone you trust will recommend. So I feel
Hmm.
in terms of finding the right therapist, maybe it's time to open more conversations with the people around us and the people we trust. Whether they know of resources that have been good for them and that have been helpful. CPPD, as I have outlined to you, is definitely a place to go. They can be reached, and recommendations can be asked for. Another, in terms of educating ourselves in terms of mental health, I have found Instagram blogs are amazing. They are amazing. One of the resources I really love to turn to is a YouTube channel called Therapy in a Nutshell. And I found it was so helpful, especially in COVID, when everyone's anxieties were so high and people were losing loved ones. It was a tremendously difficult time, I think, for everyone around the world. And this channel called Therapy in a Nutshell is by a psychologist, I think, in the US. And she makes these really lovely, bite sized, easy to understand in layman terms videos on, she had a whole series on anxiety, about naming and recognizing your feelings, about acknowledging different coping strategies. And it was a really wonderful resource. And I think I highly recommend it to anyone and everyone.
And sometimes we internalize stress so deeply
Yeah.
that or different body parts they're like stiff and uptight for like days on stretch, and we don't even realize that this is the case until we tune into ourselves and like become more self-aware. uh,
Yes.
that sort of chronic stress is something, once you become mindful of it, then you realize that you need to let go. You're holding on to emotions which are not positive or which are sort of limiting you as a person.
Yeah, I mean, and you can work on what is the stress, like where is it coming from, what belief of yourself is it coming from. Sometimes the stress can be from, oh, I'm not good enough,
Hmm.
and to recognize ki, okay, what part of that, how much of that statement is true, looking at the cognitive distortions, like, okay, what part of that is true. Am I sort of trying to catastrophize, or am I doing like black and white thinking? Is it like, all or nothing, or am I trying to fortune tell, am I trying to predict what the other person is thinking? Okay, what's coming up for me, and not just that I need to let it go, but to actively work on how can I manage this in my everyday? How can I learn to let go some of the stress? What are some of the ways that I can build in self care into my day? Because otherwise, we're giving and giving and giving and giving and giving. But
Hmm.
when are we giving to ourselves? That care needs to start with us.
That's
That's, yeah, very important thing
sometimes
to say.
it's our negative patterns of thinking which are only harming us. The loop as they call it, and it's just hurting us. The people we're thinking about or the circumstances we're thinking about might not even be true, and those people might not even be bothered to begin with. But it's just that we create that toxicity within our own internal selves.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And we don't realize it because we've been conditioned a certain way. It all stems from this need to have behavior that helps us feel safe. That starts in our childhood, right? So the more we feel the need to feel safe, we adapt to certain behaviors. But over time, those behaviors may not serve us anymore. And it's important to start recognizing what is serving me and what's not serving me. And okay, what are some things I would be willing to let go? Work with it, and then do approach it with empathy and kindness. We do fall down in the process of getting up.
Since you've mentioned about childhood and childhood traumas and conditioning several times, so
Mm.
for parents, especially of little children, can you like so give sort of like a few tips in terms of how they can like condition them into safe behavior, so that later on when they grow up they don't have to go through this journey of like trauma and healing and all of that. At least, prevent it as much as you can by like providing the right environment to children, rather than just like going with the flow and be like अच्छा environment तो बस जो है वो यही है, and then not consciously curating the environment. So how can that environment be curated for children?
I wish there was a magic wand that said, beta, this is how you need to be, and this is how the world should be, and everything will be okay, and you'll never need help. That is one level of rescuing parents cannot do for children. I think the greatest gift a parent can give to a child is to accept their child as they are, flaws and all, because none of us is perfect. And the greatest gift is to give your child a hug every day and to affirm to them that you love them no matter what, and to create sort of open space for dialogue, and also sort of help children realize, instead of victim blaming or instead of sort of being dismissive about their concerns, to take it seriously. And I recognize, again, it's difficult for parents to do that because it means confronting their own demons, their own fears, their own challenges.
Mhm.
The hardest part of child rearing perhaps is that you relive all of your own childhood stuff through your children. And I think just accepting your child and being your child's confidant and like that person is the greatest gift you can give your child.
Also like provide a relatively conflict free zone, because I think when they see adults arguing, bickering, fighting, it really really hits them hard in ways that we cannot imagine. But
Absolutely.
that thing just gets internalized, and later on it affects their own relationships and how they interact with their close ones.
Absolutely. Children do internalize a lot of what's going on in their around in their environment, and yes, conflict can make them feel unsafe and feel insecure, right?
Mhm.
Excuse me, it can make children feel on edge. It can make children feel like they need to take care of their parents' emotional needs, which is not their job. Children need to be allowed to just be children and
Yeah.
experience life and live life and grow, sort of have the growing pains, which is what helps transform us and develop us as people. Right? It helps develop our nature and our character as people. Um, but yes, I think it is important to recognize that parents do their best. Um, you know, I think that goes quite unrecognized a lot of times, that we all are in our own way doing our best for our families, for our children, and for ourselves.
So, Batul, I think this session has been super meaningful, and I really, really hope that it did address a lot of unanswered questions, which people have, whoever's listening to us. And I really hope that people also took notes of, the resources that they can access if they're going through mental health challenges, or if they see a loved one going through that. So thank you so much, Batul, for your insights and for sharing your learnings and everything. And I really hope that everyone had a great learning experience with the session as well. So
Thank you. Mhm.
thank you and take care.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I think it was really great to have this talk, and to be able to share with you and with everybody. I am on my own learning journey, so inshallah, here's hoping that more good things are coming.
Inshallah. All right. Take care, Batul.
Thank you. Take care of yourself.